I think one of the biggest ones is, at least for me, and maybe it's just my learning, but the transition from machines to software. And I think another piece of that, or another way to pop that balloon, would be the workforce has changed a lot since I started in this industry. The demographics have changed quite a bit since I started in the industry. I joked with someone the other day. I remember being the only woman sitting around some of those tables. And now you and I were at the AWI conference. It's a really different feel. Yeah. And there's a ton of next generation owners, which has changed a lot since I first started. And I think even the entrepreneur has changed a little bit. When I first started, I loved this because it really resonated because of my dad, right? All of these small business owners loved what they did and they came to do it, but that didn't mean they always had a business background. And I think that has changed. That demographic has changed, where a lot of these owners now come in with a business background and maybe have less of that hands-on wood experience that they used to have.
Welcome to Verify Infield, the Millwork podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, Cassey. Today we have guest Cassey Gibson from Innergy. And she is an engagement specialist over there, which many of you know her. Probably didn't know that was her title. She just does everything for you if you're involved with Innergy. But she, for me, has been my conference buddy at some of the AWI conferences. So I'm excited to have you on today, Cassey. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. I love it.
Yeah. Well, maybe to get started, if you could give a little bit about your background, because you started in the industry before Innergy, you had some time at AWI. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this question, and my background's kind of fun. So I hope you enjoy this little journey with me. So my dad is a pattern maker. Are you familiar with that at all? Made patterns for casting. So I did grow up around sawdust. Which makes me kind of a fun little kid that went to the shop when I was sick, right? And then I even have a great story and like an apology note for sticking a little hand broom up in the dust collector. So I have been on the shop floor as a kid. But I came to AWI actually after I got married. We moved to DC, and I knew somebody at AWI through other circles. And she was like, "Hey, can you come answer phones for us for a minute while somebody is on maternity leave?" So I started doing that in 2005. And then I ended up leaving there for a little bit because the woman came back from maternity leave. But then they came back to me in 2007 and asked me to come do membership with them. And so that was kind of my start to being part of the industry as far as AWI goes. And I did membership for a long time, which I loved, and moved into some marketing with AWI as well. And I guess left AWI in about 2019, I want to say, and came over to Innergy to be an engagement specialist, to your point, which is kind of a fun little tangent as well. So I am actually, Jacob, no longer the engagement specialist. I did. Oh, nice. I know. I thought I'd surprise you today and make that fun. I am doing more marketing, so CMO stuff on this side now.
Awesome.
Yeah, for fun. But engagement specialist was my beginning. So it is kind of a fun little start to Innergy.
Great. And so now you've been there since 2019. So like 5 years or so with Innergy, which in itself has been much of their growth, of you guys' growth journey at Innergy, right?
Yeah. When I started, our team was just discussing this morning, when did we actually release our first module or first part of our software? I don't think they've all come to consensus on that, but I want to say it was probably about 2018. I mean, you know this in software, we're agile, we release and we iterate and we release and we iterate. So I think 2018 was the first software. So when I started, everything was so new, and it really was like a group of very scrappy people who were kind of wearing all kinds of hats, just trying to make the business work. And now as we start to grow, you're seeing that change a little bit, but it's still fun to, like I did sales in the beginning. I'm not sure. Anything. Like I set up a conference, I did sales, anything that you were asked, you kind of did.
Yeah. Awesome. So now in your new role, or in your current role, and I'm sure it's still in transition, but can you explain a little bit to our listeners, what is it that you do today at Innergy?
Yeah. So I think the progression for me happened. I started and ended up a little bit in sales. Like my position did pivot when I first started with Innergy. We were going to go do like a more modular, smaller program. And then 2 weeks in, we were like, no, we're not going to do that. So did some sales. And then sales kind of naturally progressed for me to education. And the education was demand gen, right? It's the way to get our name out there. And we had great opportunity with our CEO, Mark Sanderson. Like, he has a wealth of information and knowledge about this industry. So it was a really easy pivot and transition for us. I did the education for a while as just me coordinating all the education. We now have a team of people who are helping to do that just because of the sheer volume that we're doing. And we really used education as marketing. So much of what I was doing anyways was some of that marketing, which then this year has transitioned into, why don't you do marketing? So I am leading the education and marketing teams right now. And we hired one new person this week in marketing. And then we have 2 people on the education side. So truly trying to use the education to get our name out there, but also provide value to the industry.
Right. Yeah. And kind of the core to that education piece is Innergy Peak. Is that right?
Yeah, great question. So Innergy Peak is a learning management system. And what we've done is taken a lot of the webinars that we do and a lot of the different concepts that we try and teach and created courses within Peak. So Peak is a learning management system. It's like a house for all of the education that we create. And that allows our customers in particular to come into, thousands of hours of education if they choose to use it. And some of our customers use it for onboarding new employees. That's been a really great way for people to use it. Performance improvement plans, you name it. Onboarding our software, we do have like milestones that are in that learning management system for that. So a lot of hours devoted into making sure that LMS is neat, tidy, and useful to customers. And then we do offer some of it to non-customers as well. So there is an extra catalog to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another component is your live events or live, you have summits, you've got web in-person trainings and things like that.
Yeah, we do have summits. We do that. In fact, our next one is actually going to be next year, but we do a virtual summit and we do a face-to-face summit. We do forums, which use case studies to instill kind of skills and business mindset. And then we transfer that over to the millwork industry. We do those face-to-face, and then we do a ton of workshops. Like I was at one earlier this week that was for product librarians, project managers, estimators, accounting, operational finance. It sounds riveting, but there is a whole group for them as well. So there's a huge component of securing contracts and spaces and, getting to the places where our customers are.
And so maybe I should have done this first. I assume most of our audience knows Innergy. And if you haven't, I'll put links here, but I've had Jonah Coleman on actually 2 episodes in the past, who is now head of product, I think is his title, right? And then we had Jillian Kleiner on a few weeks back also. She's in sales. And now yourself. And you, a team of you guys were also on Bruce Polling's podcast down in Australia. So I can link that as well. Awesome. But if you were to give everybody an overview, what is Innergy? Everybody that's listening who may be not familiar.
Yeah. I would say my quick elevator speech is that we're ERP software, or, birth to death software solution for architectural woodworkers. And we're created for woodworkers by woodworkers. So most of the people that you interact with have come from the industry, which makes it a bit unique. And then I think a huge part of our value proposition that we lean heavily on is that education. So a lot of software companies are going to charge you for education. That's just part of who we are. It is not an extra fee. And that is really where my side of things comes into play.
Yeah. So, you guys offer a SaaS ERP solution for the millwork industry. But along with that, tons of education. And ultimately, from my perspective, at least, kind of a way of, if you use the tools and you use the education and you use the process, you're going to be successful in your millwork business.
That's the goal.
Okay. So changing gears a little bit, you started in AWI, you spent many years over there in AWI, and then now you've spent many years in Innergy.
Yeah.
And through all that, you've engaged with a lot of people in our industry.
A ton. Yes.
From your perspective, are there any significant changes that you've observed in our industry? Maybe around particularly people, culture, leadership?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest ones is, at least for me, and maybe it's just my learning, but the transition from machines to software. And I think another piece of that, or another way to pop that balloon, would be, the workforce has changed a lot since I started in this industry. The demographics have changed quite a bit since I started in the industry. I joked with someone the other day. I remember being the only woman sitting around some of those tables. And so now you go, you and I were at the AWI conference. It's a really different feel. And there's a ton of kind of next generation owners, which has changed a lot since I first started. And I think even the entrepreneur has changed a little bit. So when I first started, I loved this because it really resonated because of my dad, right? Like all of these small business owners loved what they did and they came to do it, but that didn't mean they always had a business background. And I think that has changed, that demographic has changed where a lot of these owners now come in with a business background and maybe have less of that hands-on wood experience that they used to have. So I've seen a lot of change, I feel like, in the past 20 years, Jacob.
Yeah. It's almost 20 years. You said you started there in 2005. So a couple of things that, unpack there. You mentioned business owners have changed a little bit. And then from my perspective, one way I would maybe describe it is I think, and this industry still has a lot of this, but is evolving away a little bit from just the business owners being craftsmen first. And so, if you think about the evolution of this business, but in really any kind of service industry, a lot of times you have a doer, a person who's able to solve a set of skills to solve a problem. In our case, it's carpentry, millwork, woodworking, right? And then they do that for people. They collect money for it and they start to build a business around that. But they're the craftsmen first, right? And I think you've seen a lot of first generation business owners that were that.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're seeing both second generation or kind of next generation that's either buying or taking over these businesses are more business minded first. And so I know a lot of people have strong feelings, opinions about that in our industry. But I think that the good thing from that is, I think that's necessary for our industry to sustain, for businesses to stay open and remain profitable and successful to, have for people in our industry to make a good living.
Which is where some of the education comes in either way, right? So you're an entrepreneur and you may not know how you may run your business on spreadsheets, which is we joke. Majority of customers do come from spreadsheets. Like everyone loves a spreadsheet. So you have those kind of folks. And then you have folks who are coming in who may not understand the industry, but they understand business. And so for us, that's a really nice sweet spot of there's education on both of those. Either way, I am a lifelong learner. I love that. And so either way, you're having to pull up and learn and dig in and listen to people and talk to them and understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. And as far as the demographics too, I mean, like you said, at the conferences, for example, just speaking of like AWI, National and Spring Leadership, you see a different mix. So there are now, second generation business owners that are very involved in the AWI. Like I've had on this podcast, Dustin Gifford.
Okay, nice.
His dad founded the business. There's the Luke Remmerds, the Sebastians of the world, right? But then now we have guys like Josh Sharp, who I had on the podcast as well. And he came from the roofing industry and acquired a millwork business, right? And so he's working with at Spectrum, right? And they're energy customers. And so he's learning the craftsmanship side of the business and has people in his business that know that, right? But he's bringing a different perspective of how to, from the business side. And so that's both a different background, a different age demographic. And then as you mentioned, many years ago, it was probably just you and a couple other women there. And that has changed a lot as well. Right?
I mean, there are stories, but it has changed significantly over the years. And that's fun to watch. Right. And it's fun to be a part of.
Yeah. On that note, because this is something I've had some, I think, good conversations, and I'll give you, my experience with this, right? I had a guy named Jim Mayer on a couple weeks ago, and he has his own podcast called the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, right? Okay. And in it, we ended up talking a lot about diversity, and it was, I'm sure very helpful conversations coming from two white middle-aged dudes talking about diversity. Sure. But this is something he's touched on with his podcast, and he's gotten some pushback, and it was interesting because we share little clips from the podcast every week. Yeah. And people who watch this don't know we have clips on Instagram, Reel, whatever, and not a lot of people comment on them in general. Not a lot of people have stuff to say, but there was a lot of comments on the TikTok where he said the word diversity.
Interesting.
And it triggered an algorithm. I got a lot of people who don't care about
Yeah.
millwork, but don't like
Just
that,
wanted to
right?
talk about it. Yep.
Yes. There's a very strong feelings about when we start talking about
Sure.
diversity, start talking
Sure.
about, these types of things. So from your perspective, I'm curious, what would you say to those in our industry
Yeah.
who maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable with that or feel, hey, like, what is it that you guys are getting at?
Yeah. No, fair. This is straight Cassey opinion. I want to be valued for what I bring to the table. And that part of it doesn't matter to me, right? Like I want to
Yeah.
come to the table because I am intelligent, because I understand the industry, because I have something to offer. And if I don't, like, I don't want to be at the table either. So that is something
Right.
I have, I have a little girl, and that is something that I
Yeah.
try and instill in her as well. Like, no, you're coming to the table equal, to be part of the conversation and to bring value to that. And for people that are uncomfortable with that, what would I say to them, Jacob? That's a great question. I'm really sorry that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
No, I try very hard to communicate as clearly as possible. And I know that there are definitely different communication styles even in that. And so I will work hard at like, hey, I'm going to be direct. I'm going to try and get my point across and take my emotion out of it. Any of those things have been important to me to be valued in that space. So to the people who are uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we
Yeah.
grow from discomfort.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also there's an idea of, I think a lot of the pushback comes from the idea of like affirmative action
Sure.
and people getting into roles not because they deserve it, but because of their minority,
Sure.
right? And I think there's a lot of pushback of that. And what I would say to that is, one, I think we all agree that it should be in, what's the
Inclusive.
incentive base or uh, based on results, right?
Yes.
Like deserve
Yeah.
it. The problem comes when the results don't represent the pool you're pulling people from, right?
Yes.
And so what stands out to me when I go to these conferences, still to this day, it's because I've been in many, many shops. I've worked in many, many shops across the U.S. They're all very diverse. You go into the shop, you go into the companies, you go into the buildings, both from an ethnic background, both from a socioeconomic background, both from a gender background, both from a religious background. Like it's very diverse. Our industry is diverse. What's not diverse is that leadership level, the people that are at these conferences that are the decision makers. And so the challenge that I would pose to anybody listening that feels attacked by that or feels like uncomfortable with that is, is there something that you can or should be doing to help that? Not, hey, I need to go promote minorities just to have minorities in my leadership team.
Sure. No.
But it's, am I truly actually making the decisions based on, do I have a good representation? And the other thing I would have people think about is why this is important is because if you don't have people in positions of influence that represent everybody that's in your team, you're not getting that perspective when you're making decisions. I think that's the really important part is regardless of who's the owner, who's the leaders, who's the vice presidents, what do they look like, where do they come from? It's when you're in those rooms making tough decisions about hiring, about benefits, about where the business is going. Should we do this or should we do that? That it's very easy. And this is something that I think is just basically what we're not talking about is your intent. We're talking about the result. And I think the results show the process. And so that's what I've tried to challenge myself is like, are we considering everybody's perspective equally when we're making those decisions?
And whether it's where they're located, right? Like my, you know what? I grew up in California. I may think really differently than someone that grew up here in Virginia, just based on how there's so many facets to that where you want to include other people in that conversation. And that is something I've loved at Innergy, right? I am a woman on the management team at Innergy. My voice is valued as that, because I think it's different a little bit than some of the other ones. And so I'm with you. I think that we have to embrace respect here, all the things that come along with, there's all the things on the shop floor. There's all the things in the office, we have to be okay with that and listen to it.
Well, and I think especially with where we're at, where everybody is so hard pressed for talent right now.
Yeah.
And anything that we can do to make is a larger group of people feel welcomed and interested in working for us, I think is beneficial. And so if you're unintentionally, so, if people come and they see your company and they say, well, I don't see anybody there that looks like me.
Right.
Or I don't see anybody, like, I don't feel like there's an opportunity there. That's not necessarily intentional by you, but you have to address that if you're wanting to be able to have that person feel like they have the ability to apply for you. And I think Jillian and I had a good conversation about this because she has a unique background. She came through
Shop floor.
through the shop floor and through the unions. And from her perspective, she said, those were my brothers. I actually she felt more respected and invited home there than she did in real estate. But from an outsider's perspective, for me, for both, you would think, hey, there's a lot more women like her in real estate than there are in carpentry union, right?
Sure.
And so what I would hope people take from this is we are a welcoming industry.
I think.
But I think there's more that we can do to make sure everybody sees that.
I think it continues to change in a really positive way. And to your point, I think there's a lot of different voices and perspectives to be heard that will continue to help the industry grow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So now at Innergy, obviously we've talked a lot about the changes in the industry.
Yeah.
Things you're seeing now. And as that dynamic changes, because everything we're talking about goes into everything you do every day, right? But from the education, engagement, and now marketing, right? You're getting into the minds of the industry, getting into the minds of the consumer, and like, how do we engage all of our audience, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how, Innergy and you approach that and things that you guys are doing, maybe that's not, that's unique for our industry?
A little unconventional. So one thing that I'm trying really hard to do, I believe strongly in social learning. And so I think there's something to be said for, you and I going through a course together, or you going through a course separately and me going through a course separately versus us going through it together, and you and I being able to have shared experience, not only with the course, but also me to learn from you and you to learn from me. And so within our LMS, we do have channels for that. Like there is shared learning where anyone can post something that they've heard or seen, or I want it to take off more than it is. I think we're all hardest on ourselves. So I definitely, that is something I think that we're doing that is unique. I know there's forums and stuff like that, but specific to education, I think that's something Innergy's doing. And then just ample opportunity. I think there's a lot of education in this industry around the shop floor or how to use a machine. There's a lot less of it around the day-to-day or how to use a software, how to learn. I mean, you can speak to it better than I can, how to learn an engineering software, right? How to learn ERP software. And so really trying to say, you could probably hire anyone because it's hard to find people, but do you have the resources to teach them this industry or to teach them how to use this? And so I think Innergy's, I have been working very hard at creating a space where hopefully we help with workforce development, hopefully having those education resources available to the business owner allows them to help improve, performance improvement plans, even if there's something somebody can improve on that asset or that's there for them. So I definitely think that's a little bit different. Like I said before, I think the all-inclusive part of what we're doing is really different. You could come to, we do our forums and it's 3 weeks over the span of probably 12 to 18 months, but you're sitting in a room with 30 other business owners and you're using case studies to talk about business, but then applying that back to your company. And you're able to do that in a space with all these other owners. That's very unique in this industry. And me maybe not being as smart as you or someone else in the room being able to capitalize on the knowledge of somebody else and being willing to share. I think, that's my favorite thing about this industry, and it always has been, is that entrepreneurs are cool people and they have a lot of really interesting knowledge to share and not always the forum to do it. So trying to provide those experiences where they can.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, one, you mentioned about being able to onboard and train people. I think that is one of the biggest gaps our industry has. And I think every company I've been in has had this struggle. And I think when I hear people say, oh, we can't find people, a lot of times it's even if you have somebody and you place them, somebody has to train them. And generally your people are already overwhelmed, over scheduled, over capacity. And so then to take time away from that to train them and onboard them means like, okay, even if you set warm bodies in front of me, that doesn't help with the problem. And so having the content, having the training information, having the processes there to where, okay, now I have somebody that has the capability. They just need to know what to do. They need somebody to walk them through
Well,
it, or a video or something.
and being able to promote from within, right? I mean, if you have a loyal employee who's given you all its time, why wouldn't you want to upskill them and keep them? Versus, I mean, I am someone who does value education and I want an opportunity to learn. And if I'm in an environment where I don't have that, probably not going to stick around. And I think that,
Right.
especially about a younger generation, like they want to learn all these different things. Why are they flipping jobs? It's because they don't have the opportunity to absorb and learn. And if you can upskill somebody that's already there, I think you're much better off. It's expensive to hire new people.
Yep. No, I definitely think that's one of the unique things you guys provide is one, the educational resources, but two, the community, because, from a marketing perspective, one of the strongest tools a business has is social proof.
Yeah.
And so I think a big thing is other customers that are saying we're using this and it's working and here's what it's doing for us. And with that, with Innergy and with you get that community of, hey, here's another business that's right near you. You can talk to them or they're at the forum or they're at the summit or they're on the webinar. And having those other resources, like this is something that I've always struggled with in our industry in general with all of our software is it's like, I came from an architecture background. So it was like, I could just Google for days and find other people using the same softwares, using the same stuff. And you can look at that and say, oh, wow, they figured out a way to make it do what they need.
Right.
But within our industry, it's like crickets. There's nothing. There's no content about specifically, our use case of stuff. So that's what you get access to. You can talk to the other business owner, talk to the other estimator that's using the same tool you are for the same thing you're doing in a different market and use from that. Oh, wow, this is what they've done and they've been successful. Now I can replicate that.
And I mean, even in an education setting where like product librarian is where I was earlier this week, not something that I understand or am really great at, but there's a group of people sitting in that space together that are doing exactly what you're saying. Hey, I use it to do this. I mean, a box is a box, right? When you're making it, but how you're using the software to get really good results. There's a good learning curve for people to learn from each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's key. And that's something that, I'm glad that you guys are able to use Innergy, use the community to encourage more activity. I know AWI is working really hard on this as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's key for our industry going forward is we're a very reclusive industry. Like everybody kind of keeps themselves partly out of business, but partly out of fear. Yeah. And every business owner I talk to is always like, how are we compared to the other shops you talk to? How are we, are we as terrible? And everybody is better than they think they are compared to everybody. And so I think we're all very like, okay, we need to cover up all of our flaws and stuff. But I think that transparency and that sharing allows everybody to see, my problem is not as unique as I thought it was, but also somebody else can then speak to that and say, oh, well, here's what we've done, or we're struggling with the same thing. Can we kind of go through this together?
100%. And you know what? We all want community, whether it's in this industry or somewhere else. So I think it's a great way to find it. Like there's a lot of problem solving happening together. And our customers have been incredible. I mean, even when I was at AWI, members, they're incredible about opening up their businesses and allowing you to walk through. And I mean, you can take something away from any plant tour, whether it's in this industry or not. There's probably something that you can pull back. And so we do try and include that in our education as well. Let's walk through their plant. Let's see what they're doing in the office, right? We believe a lot of that change happens in the office. So how are they doing it there?
Right.
Collaboration.
I think also a lot of, owners and leaders are fearful of like, if I open up or if I expose my people to what everybody else is doing, they're going to see. And I think a lot of the fear is, they're going to leave me and go to them. Right. Like, they're going to see it's better over there. And I think one comment I would have to that is I think you would be surprised that it's not always better. And I think that the fact that people see that and they can have context, because without any information, the grass is always greener. So I think for your people, they're going to see that, think that as well. It's like, well, I don't know anything about what I have here. And I'm always concentrating on problems we have, the pain points we have. And I think exposing them to other shops, they're also going to see, they have some problems. Right. It's not just 100% better over there. So
yes.
I think that helps mentally for your team as well to see, one, my owner is not fearful, not trying to like keep us in a cage, but also, oh, wow, yeah, it's not just us that's struggling with
And
this.
my owner's investing in me to go learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we do at some of our events or most of our events, we've said like, hey, this is not a recruitment. This is not a recruitment fair. You're not here to do that, but there is a lot of
Right.
knowledge sharing. And so we do try to be very cognizant of that piece of this industry. Because, workforce development is the toughest. Finding workforce is one of the toughest problems we still hear in this industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're a really great place to work, you can't steal your employees.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one, if you are hesitant and fearful of that, I think there's some introspection needed. Like, why?
Yep.
What is it that you're insecure about? Is it something you should be addressing?
Yeah.
So that you don't have to, I mean, there's always going to be a certain level of insecurity as an entrepreneur. There's always going to be people you can't do anything about them leaving.
Yeah.
But I think what you can do, do the best you can where you're at, invest in your people, and I think, be a place that you're not afraid to open up about.
It's a great place to work. I think one of the other things, back to the Innergy conversation, like we are cloud-based, and that does open up the work pool much greater because you can work from anywhere. So I do think that fear is real. Hey, I'm going to come here and I may be in DC, but I'm going to steal somebody from California. We really do work hard not to allow that to happen. Yeah.
So shifting gears again, looking forward now, what are your hopes and aspirations? What would you love to see, or what do you see happening in the future of our industry going forward?
I think a depth of knowledge is what I really hope. I hope that we have an easier time bringing people in, like finding workers to come into this industry. I hope that, myself, like that is something I work towards, is making it scalable for our customers to bring in new employees and how that would work. I hope that the industry becomes, we always joke like, oh, machines are so sexy, is software too. And I think software is, I think as people come out of school, I think software is a really great way to pull people in. And so I personally want to see the success of our customers and the people in this industry. I love this industry. Clearly, I've devoted 20 years of my life to this industry. But a lot of that is just really great people and hoping that they succeed in what they do, right? And the goal for everyone is to make money. So how can you best do that?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely agree. I think software is it's having a moment right now with AI and everything and just in the world in general. And so I think that it's important that as an industry, we don't let that pass us by, because there are people already that are grabbing a hold of that and leveraging that in our industry. And so, but definitely for a recruiting standpoint, and really just from a success of your business standpoint, there's so much that can be accomplished by leveraging software.
I don't want to diminish either. Like, there are great traditions in this industry. There's a ton of beauty in what our customers are creating. I mean, some of these projects that you see, like Design Solutions is a great example from AWI. It's unbelievable the amount of beauty that is in what they do. And there is a really rich history. And I know AWI embraces that as well. But I think software just progresses us further. And honestly, machines too. I mean, remember the world before CNCs. So I definitely think both of those things have added to the progression, but I definitely would not want to let go of, there's just a rich history to what it already exists.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, obviously we've talked about how Innergy is contributing to kind of shaping a positive future, but how do you think, you guys in the future, but other organizations in our industry, how can everybody contribute to shaping this future?
Oh, Jacob, that was a hard question. That's actually a very hard question. I really believe it's creating a good place to work. I really believe that it is getting out in your community. So I know there's a lot of organizations, whether they're customers of ours or not, that are, I had a conversation earlier this week with somebody that's like, look, I run all these competitions with the local high school. Would my kid know about architectural woodwork had I not been in this industry? I don't know. And so I definitely think the onus is on all of us to help preserve that, to make it exciting and interesting and competitive with other industries. I mean, is our pay competitive? Is our workplace environment competitive? We had a diversity inclusion conversation earlier. Are we including people in what we do to make it look really interesting and different? And I think that's on all of us as we continue to progress, I think that onus is on every one of us to make it interesting and to share what it is.
I agree. I think that means a lot, and like, for example, we've been starting to get involved with Skills USA.
Love it.
I had no clue that existed until the last year.
Yeah.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I went through high school and university in the US, and I didn't know any of that existed, much less these trades. And so, and the entirety of the time that I've been in this industry, I don't know that I've ever had a conversation with somebody where they say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I tell them that they understood what that meant, that they knew what our industry was. And I think that's something that directly impacts recruiting, directly impacts, everything that we're talking about. Because, for example, I came from architecture.
Yeah.
Architecture is a very, I say it's a sexy job.
Yeah.
Like that's always like the romantic interest in the show is like a wealthy architect, right? In reality, though, it's more like a musician, I say, because there's like a handful of rock stars and then a bunch of starting, architects trying to make a living doing what they're really passionate about, and mostly doing work like cover bands, like that type of stuff. They're doing jobs that they don't, I think there's this idea of it. But what that does is it means people want to be architects, even though it's likely not a very, well compensated career. Yep. And so what we don't have in our industry is, I think I've made a much better living in this industry than I would have as an architect, most likely. But it's not sexy. It's not something that people like to say, like I spent many years just going home covered in sawdust, right? And so I think we can do a better job of that. We do amazing work. We do stuff that, like, for me, as an engineer, I would get excited about working on the new Falcon Stadium, working on a casino, working on a Google office, working on this type of stuff that I feel like we discount constantly. Like, oh, well, but we know the problems with the work that we do. And it's like, no, we do awesome stuff and we get to work on really cool projects. I think in general, just within your day-to-day, share that excitement, share that pride within your team, of like, hey guys, look at this project we get to do. Isn't this awesome? Like, aside from the pay, aside from the company we work for, aside from, like, this is an opportunity not everybody gets to be a part of. We should be able to have some excitement and pride in
share the win, right? Like, I mean, even for, so I'll bring it back to software because that's what I live. But even that, we have a whole team channel devoted. Like, we share wins of what's going on, or, hey, this customer crushed it. Like, they're doing incredible things. Or I think sharing those wins, and kind of to your point, I mean, I have kids, right? When we walk into a beautiful hotel and there's gorgeous woodwork, I'm like, hey, one of my customers may have done that. Like, they wouldn't think about that otherwise. It just sits in a building for them. And so I do think pointing that out. And I just think that industries evolve. Like, to your point earlier, there's a lot of craftsmen and it's gorgeous and it's beautiful, but so much of the world is focused on technology. And our industry has that too. Like, you can come in and use really cool software. You can come in and use really cool machines. Like, there's a lot of really great things that you could be part of. It's pointing it.
No, absolutely. I think so. And so for everybody was going to take some takeaways from this, one, I think from a marketing standpoint, our industry could do a much better job speaking to our people internally, internal marketing of like, hey, the people that are in this industry, here's why you want to stay in it. People that don't know about it, here's what you should know about it. And I think speaking more to the people, I mean, in general, like, too many companies share pictures of work without people in it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so I think that the more you share it, like, people's what we care about, people what sparks interest. And I think people want to see not only in your finished product, how can they envision themselves in that space, but also in your work environment, how can they envision themselves in that space? And so when you show your CNC, show the operator. When you show the engineering drawing, show the guy that did it. When you show the install, show the guys there. Like, people can place themselves and say, oh, I'm like them. I could do that. That guy looks excited at what he's doing. I think that's the message that we're missing.
I see myself doing that. Yeah. I see myself there. I see myself growing. I see myself happy. I see myself content, all of those things. Yeah.
I think as far as, like you said, sharing the wins, like, the people in your organization that have grown. I mean, I have a client that I'm thinking of right now that he came from the shop, came through everything, went to college while he worked for the company. Now he's the CFO.
Nice.
but he's done installed and everything. Like there are careers to be made here that don't end at the shop door.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that's another thing, is letting people see that, hey, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a leader in a business, you can be an owner. There's tons of ESOPs in our industry. So I know I turned this into a commercial for Millwork.
No. You had asked me kind of in prep, like how is Innergy going to contribute in the future? And so much of what you're saying is what I kind of thought through. Like, hey, I don't know about you. The whole reason I'm here is because I care about this industry, and I hope to make a difference in it, right? Like we all hope to make a difference in some capacity in our life. And does the software, does our software provide flexibility to those entrepreneurs to get away and spend time with their family? That's a win to me if they're getting to do that. Are we helping to grow workforce? Is that what we're doing? Yeah, I hope so. I think that matters. Are we allowing people to skill up? Like, I think that's really important. And then we talked about connection. That's huge to me. Like, I think you can learn from me and I can learn from you. And I think providing avenues or events or, online forums, whatever the case is, to allow people to connect like that, I think it's really important, because it's hard to take away from your day to day to learn and connect with other people, but you're going to get so much more out of it.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I totally agree. Well, Cassey, thank you so much for coming on. It's always fun and a blast when we get to hang out and talk. And I appreciate you being able to hear, sharing about your story, your background, and your experience. I'll include a link if anybody's interested in finding out more about Innergy.
Awesome.
If people are interested in reaching out to you, what's the best way they could do so?
Yeah, my email is pretty easy. It's my name, Cassey, Cassey.Gibson @Innergy.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and all the ways. You should be able to find me in all the ways. But thank you for having me today. This was a real pleasure. It's fun to chat this industry with somebody else in this industry.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks, Cassey. I'll link those for everybody. So if you go to the show notes, you should be able to link right to Innergy and to Cassey. And hope to have you on again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.